It gives me distinct pleasure, and it's an honor, to introduce to you Dr. Ronya Foy Connor. Dr. Connor can be considered a sisterin of the soil as she hails from the sister island of Anguilla, which she makes her home. Dr. Connor has many interests. She combines her interests in international studies, community service, and cultural travel through a range of activities. She is a youth teacher and mentor, in addition to a public speaker at career and educational forums. She has worked for the New York City government and the United States federal government, as well as in the private sector, assisting with human services, policy planning, and applied research. Dr. Foy Connor has co-facilitated self-improvement courses, conducted individual and group counseling sessions, and is certified as an anger management counselor. She holds a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Public Administration from Cornell University with a concentration in public administration, human rights, and social justice. She has also earned her Master of Social Work and Doctor of Philosophy from Howard University in Washington, D.C., completing her PhD dissertation on women social entrepreneurs, local development, and community sustainability. Throughout her academic tenure, she has received numerous scholarships and fellowships, including the prestigious Roichi Sasakawa Fellowship for International Dissertation Research and the Boren Fellowship to learn the most widely spoken language in Africa, Swahili. Though a native New Yorker, she has lived in Washington, D.C., Zanzibar, Tanzania, and most recently, Anguilla, where she serves as the Gender Development Coordinator for the island. Dr. Foy Connor loves to organize individual and group travel as a travel agent director and has personally covered the globe by visiting countries on every continent except for Antarctica. Some of her favorite international destinations include Japan, Brazil, Ghana, Totola, and Israel. She finds it rewarding to spend quality time with her family and to interact with new individuals, discovering what their passions are and assisting them in reaching higher personal goals. She fulfills this calling throughout the community as the founder of the Living Water Counseling based in Anguilla. In this season of her life, she is focused on, and I quote, sowing in spirit, service, and scholarship. Remembering that those who sow sparingly will also reap sparingly, and those who sow bountiful will also reap bountiful. This is taken from 2 Corinthians 9, chapter 9, 6. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome with a great St. Martin round of applause, Dr. Foy Connor.
I bring you warm greetings from the Government of Anguilla, the Ministry of Home Affairs, Gender Affairs Unit, under the Honorable Minister for Gender, Mrs. Cora Richardson Hodge, and the Honorable Ministerial Assistant for Gender, Mrs. Everly Bradley. To the Honorable Minister of Public Health, Social Development, and Labor, Emil Lee, the Women's Desk, Mrs. Ida Holloman, and Mrs. Elencia Baptiste Bozeman, who were instrumental in organizing my presence here tonight. Other honored guests, to the wonderful performers, contributors, and to each one of you. It is certainly an honor for me to address you this evening. Let me say thank each of you. Thank you so much for the work that you do in any and every capacity to address the issues that I will speak about tonight. We'll have a conversation about the types of violence affecting women and girls, the pressing ways that music and the media are contributing to a culture of abuse of the feminine mind, spirit, soul, and body, the immediate and long-term impacts that the portrayal of women has on the individual, family, and society. And then I'll conclude by addressing what responses we should take in order to focus on prevention and protection. And let me say, at some point I will ask some questions that are rhetorical, but if you think that you have a response, you have something you'd like to say, please feel free to raise your hand and express that, because I think part of really getting this topic out in the open is to make sure that we're all able to lend our voices. So the topic of the impact and influence of music and media on violence against women and girls is one that has no clear-cut solutions or magical fixes to turn back decades, if not centuries, of abuse against the female sex. This in no way negates the violence and abuse that we are witnessing among young men, which I would claim is on the rise. This too is a serious issue. But tonight, we focus on women and girls in recognition of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. A United Nations Unite to End Violence initiative, which actually began in 1991. The topic of ending violence and promoting gender equality was a focus of the United Nations Millennium Development Goals, and it continues now with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I'm pleased that in addition to the full lineup of programs taking place for the 16 Days of Activism in Anguilla, we are seeing collaboration now, and as was said, friendship, in addition to collaboration, between Anguilla and St. Martin through tonight's event. I look forward to welcoming the Women's Desk representatives on the 9th of December in Anguilla, when we will be hosting a panel series focused on the next steps after passing Anguilla's Domestic Violence Act. This actually just occurred on the 3rd of November, after years without any protection for domestic violence victims. So as part of the Gender Affairs Unit initiatives, and along with the newly elected ministers, the first time in Anguilla's history to have 3 women elected ministers, we were able, yes, that's something to applaud, we were able to finally have this Domestic Violence Act passed. So now, orders of protection can be secured by victims, survivors of violence, and setting the groundwork of counseling and reform for abusers, perpetrators, is also something that we can now focus on. Through partnerships, such as the one here with the government of St. Martin, I believe that we can truly unite to strengthen our families and communities. The 16 Days of Activism is providing us with this unique opportunity, and each one of you are beneficiaries of that. Now let me briefly set the stage now by asking, is violence and abuse against women and girls an area of concern? Is it truly a problem? Okay. You wouldn't believe it, but in some forums, people will tell you no, it's not a problem. It's not an issue. But I think we've done a great job of establishing that so far through creative performances and through dance, that yes, it is something that we need to pay attention to, we need to understand, and we each have a responsibility to work toward ending violence against women and girls. So according to a special investigation, you'll see here, which took place by the United Nations Commission for Violence Against Women, along with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, sexual violence is a major concern in the Caribbean region. The report that was conducted here covers the countries of Jamaica, Barbados, Dominica, and Trinidad and Tobago. It actually took place only 7 months ago. And through this report, it was found that of all reported cases of sexual violence, 97% were against girls. Similarly, once removed from abusive situations, there are no safe havens or no homes for girls, so many were put into safe care in juvenile detention centers or in the prison system. So if you think about this, though they committed no criminal offense, these young ladies were in the prison system as a place of safety. To make matters worse, most abusers or perpetrators were not prosecuted for their violation of the human rights of these girls, but instead, they made bargains and settlements with the families in lieu of prosecution. So how does this cycle end? This is something that we need to stop, think about, and really protect our girls from this type of abuse. In these countries, there are no laws, or there are inadequate laws, that address this endemic situation that clearly disproportionately affects our girls. So I think through that we see that yes, it is a problem, it is a concern. And this is just one area talking about sexual abuse. I'm sure that we're all familiar with the fact that violence and abuse comes in many forms. But let me just highlight quickly some of the types of violence so that we can have a detailed picture of the situations that are facing our women and girls. The various types of violence against women and girls include sexual violence, such as rape. This is whether by a stranger, in a dating relationship, or otherwise. We have incest, which we know is sexual abuse by a family member. And I'll tell you that there are too many cases coming to my office right now on this issue of incest. It's family secrets that are hidden, but it's time that it comes to the light so we can do something to protect these young girls. Various types of abuse, such as verbal. We know about these. This can be toward one another. Women and girls verbally abusing one another. With themselves, the self-talk of self-hate, of putting yourself down, verbal abuse against the self, and from others. We have emotional abuse, which are the hidden scars to the outside world, but very real to the person experiencing it. Psychological, which affects the mind, the psyche, and this can be based on any form of abuse. These are the memories that constantly replay in your mind. And physical abuse, this is probably the most commonly known form of abuse. It's the most recognizable, but still, it's covered up, and it's taboo to discuss. At the global level, some of these concerns may apply to the Caribbean region, but we see this violence and abuse in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, and in Sub-Saharan Africa. Issues of girls unable to go to school and get an education. It limits their opportunities for advancement, and if you really think about the long-term effects, it increases the dependency that girls and women have on others for their well-being and their sustenance. Female genital cutting, or female genital mutilation, as it was previously called, is a human rights violation of the bodies of teen girls. Human trafficking, mainly for sex work, is an even growing problem here in St. Martin. There was a recent study by the United Nations that pinpointed human trafficking, particularly for sex work, as the majority of what those coming into St. Martin end up falling into, and not by their own means. Sometimes they're here under false pretense, and it turns out that they enter into sex work. And we have women that are silenced in other countries, unable to speak out at public forums such as these. They're unable to hold leadership positions in society, or even in churches. Some of the other less spoken about types of abuse is spiritual abuse by religious doctrine that is interpreted to make women subservient to men. This is part of the move toward gender equality, which starts with an understanding of gender norms, what has traditionally been the, quote, place of a woman. We need to start exploring gender norms and gender roles and see how it affects us in our daily lives. In actuality, women are to be helpmates and not subservient in households, in communities, or in any religious institution. The strength of a woman is a strength that complements. The last source of violence and abuse that I'd like to highlight against women and girls, and it was alluded to by your minister, and this has to do with the technological age. It's what I'd like to call cyber violence. It's our main source of communication and the World Wide Web of social media. Our issues surrounding violence have just increased, and they're now coming from international sources, seconds at a time, every single moment of the day. From cities and countries that maybe we've never even heard of, we're getting information from. And from people whom we've never met, who are more than willing to voice their opinions on social media sites, and oftentimes violently voice their opinions with threats, verbal threats, written threats, and text message abuse or Facebook posts. Do you ever take the time to really think about what that can do to your psyche? How that affects you? How that affects your children? For the young and old, the cyber world is one where people are seeking acceptance, posting photos, taking selfies, what is the one where you take a group picture, Aussies, something like that? Taking all of these photos, posting it up, seeing how many likes I can get, how many shares. Teenagers are starting e-forums to bash other students in school. They're gathering a following of others who also seek to hate or bash other people. So now we have this new medium to promote bullying. And unfortunately, these actions are creating depression in our youth and suicidal thoughts as their way of escaping from not feeling loved and accepted. The deep loneliness that's associated with the technological age is creating an insensitivity, a generation with little regard for human life. But can you really blame us? We're seeing this through school shootings, the recent mass shootings in public areas and public spaces. It's the lack of face-to-face human interaction that's really created a cold society. So it's no wonder that this level of disassociation and brokenness leaves humans wanting more. Next slide. It leaves us unfulfilled. And where there is no vision, the people perish. I would add that where there is no vision to positively uplift and better society, the people also perish. We must have a vision as the Women's Desk here in St. Martin, as Gender Affairs Unit in Anguilla. We must have a vision to tackle these issues head on. I encourage you to ask yourselves, what is my vision for building the strength and the capacity of girls and women in this society? What is your personal vision? Now, can I be honest with you? If our vision is not clear, the vision of media and music producers, directors, writers, their vision is very clear. The vision of this industry of music and media is solely for profit. Next slide. To take advantage of a mainstream year 2015, almost 2016 culture that sends us the following messages. And excuse me if some of this may be a little graphic, but I'm sure you've heard worse on television or YouTube, or you've seen worse, as we mentioned, on the billboards, just riding around. But this is the message that's being sent. First, sex sells. With these images, women subscribe to them, and we want to portray them. Men subscribe to it and want to see it. That's just clearly what it is. Second, women are objects, used by men, used by other women, in some cases, used by ourselves from the lack of self-love. We see our bodily attributes and we think that's what makes us who we are. The other vision that music and media has given us. 3, young girls must aspire to find what makes them physically sexy. The mind, the spirit, the emotions, not relevant. 4, role models for girls are Beyoncé, with an over-sexed alter ego, Sasha Fierce. Rihanna, our very own Caribbean girl, the good girl, gone bad. Think about these things, who accepted physical abuse and then went back to her abuser. That's Chris Brown, if you don't remember that from a few years ago. And Nicki Minaj, another split personality and cartoon-like image, who's only affiliated with thugs. The understanding of beauty has even shifted. More revealing clothes or tighter clothing, more makeup, brighter colors on the face. Excuse me, but more clown-like. It's true. This is considered beautiful as opposed to natural beauty. Even our ideas of good hair is a problem in our society. We're in a serious crisis where self-identity is no longer just that. Women and girls are identifying and defining themselves based on false images. These are well-calculated and well-crafted images that are created and developed for the sole purpose, once again, of profit for the music and media industries. There's no consideration for the connection to low self-esteem, eating disorders, teenage pregnancy, or youth promiscuity, even fits of rage and anger. It's all linked. And the lack of respect for parental figures and elders. All of these issues are connected. It is not just what girls and women are taught about themselves from music videos and the message in lyrics. It's also what young boys and men are taught about women through these same messages. They are strategically programmed to be oversexed before they ever have a chance to enter puberty. I'm talking about men, or young boys, excuse me, I'm talking about boys here. They're strategically programmed to be oversexed before they ever have a chance to enter puberty or to understand the meaning of their hormones. I want to quickly show you select lyrics from a Nicki Minaj song. And I did notice, so I have to say this, when this came up, and when this came up and the lyrics were posted, I saw some individuals at this table kind of smile and look back. So I guess that means you're familiar with this song? Yes, thank you. Thank you for being honest. So this is a Nicki Minaj song, which you can read the lyrics, but I'll just read them out loud. It says, pills and potions, we're overdosing. I'm angry, but I still love you. Pills and potions, we're overdosing. Can't stand it, but I still love you. So before I say anything about this, let me get someone to tell me, what are the themes? So far, what I've discussed, What are some of those themes that you see coming up in this particular song? Anyone? Just raise your hand. Suicide, addiction. Anyone else? That's good. Suicide and addiction. So from this small selection, this is only a small selection of the entire song, of one song out of hundreds of thousands of songs, some worse than this. You can see the influences that listeners are subjected to, and you see the various abuses portrayed. I would say what we see here is drugs, pills, potions, which is alcohol. We also see anger, right? I'm angry, but at the same time, but I still love you. So there's some confusion in there as well. Mixed drugs, alcohol, anger, confusion. Probably not a good combination. So this is what we're seeing in the music. And it says, I can't stand it. I can't stand it, but I still love you. That means you can't stand it, but you're still around. You're still there. You're still willing to take this individual back. You're still willing to subject yourself to this type of pain and abuse. We see a disrespect of the woman, mind, body, spirit, and soul. We see an abuse of her mind. We see her spirit taken away, her soul almost non-existent, unimportant even. Think back to the types and forms of abuse that I mentioned earlier, and do you see how all of these things are linked? The impact that music has, it's all linked. And subconsciously, it becomes a part of us if we're not aware about what we're listening to. It leads to a warped culture that is unrealistic, and it promotes disharmony and abuse in relationships. Back. It ties into our young men not believing in marriage. How can one woman possibly commit to how can one man possibly commit to one woman? All of these women are dancing around in the music videos. I can have any woman I want. Why would I want to commit to just one?